Hello, everyone. Excited for this very next edition of Conscious Conversation. We're going to have a very, very special guest with us today. Looking forward to having them on and introducing them more formally, but it's Joye Braun with the Indigenous Environmental Network. Yes, happy Friday. Happy day after Earth Day. Also wanted to send some apologies. We had some scheduling snafu, and we may not have an ASL interpreter for this Instagram Live, but we will commit to posting it with captions, and if that changes throughout, we will deal with it and navigate it as we do best. And it looks like Joye has joined us, so I'm going to give it a second to go ahead and... Hello!
Hey!
Hello, hello! Happy Friday!
Happy Friday to you!
Thank you so much for taking some time. It's a pleasure to get to meet with you and share some space with you on the day after Earth Day, especially. Right before you got on, I was just doing a quick introduction. I was just saying I was excited for this next edition of Conscious Conversation. If it's okay, maybe I'll read a little bit of your bio, and then we can kind of dive right in. Would that be okay?
Yeah, sounds good.
Awesome, awesome. Well, for those who are tuning in or those who are going to be checking this out later, our esteemed guest is a member of the Indigenous Environmental Network, a leading frontline community organizer, and an accomplice in the fight for justice for all. Their name is Joye Braun. Am I saying that correctly?
Yeah.
Okay. Yep. Joye was one of the first campers at Sacred Stone Camp, and moved to Oseti Sakowin Camp and was at the Black Hoop or 7 Generations Camp during the eviction of the camps. Joye's history of community activism includes the long-fought campaign against the Keystone Pipeline, the project that resurrected at the same time DAPO was renewed and continues to threaten her homelands. She is also making stands to protect the sacred Black Hills, her ancestral sacred lands, against fracking, uranium, and gold mining. Joye travels extensively and speaks throughout the Northern Plains and participates in Indigenous gatherings in the US and Canada about the negative impacts the extractive economy has on the rights of Indigenous peoples, the abuses taking place in the oil patch, pipeline work, and communities where man camps bring drugs, human trafficking, and increased crime rates wherever they are located. And then I'm sure Joye also wants me to lift up that they are a wife, a mother, and a grandmother. So thank you so much for joining us today.
Well, thank you for having me. Wanbli Wiyan Imachi Api Chante Washte Nape Chiuza Hape Wanbli Paha Imataha. So I just said that my name is Eagle Feather Woman, and I greeted you all with a hearty handshake and wish you all have a good day. And then I said that I'm from Eagle Butte, South Dakota. So I was speaking Lakota, or what the non-native people call Sioux. We don't call ourselves Sioux. But
Thank you for that greeting. So my first question for you, Joye, is in the spirit of organizer Ella Baker, who are your people?
Wow. So Ella Baker embodied the in order for these movements to move forward, you must have women. you know, and in the very early days, you know, patriarchy and colonialism and and capitalism and all the crap that was forced on us as people, we had to utilize what was there. And so a lot of times we lifted up our men, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we lifted up very patriarchal men, right? And which is fine, but the backbone of the movement, the backbone of any justice movement is women. And without women, you can't move forward. And so Ella Baker was this amazing powerhouse, and she didn't want to be, you know? She didn't want to be. And that's how women are, because we just do what you got to do. And so I look to our matriarchs. I look to the women who came before me, and they're older grandmas now, and believe me, they'll put you in check. So I have amazing mentors. I have people like Madonna Thunderhawk. I have people like Mabel Ann Eagle Hunter. I have people like Phyllis Young. I have women like my mom, Sandra Fraser. I have my grandma who's passed on, Ione Lee. So I look to those people, and to look, because we always take care of one another. We cook, we feed, we make sure you have coffee. We do the work that needs to be done, and that's who Ella Baker was. And I loved it. It was amazing.
Awesome. So tell us a little bit, Joy, about how you actually got into this work. How did you get into organizing?
Oh, so I grew up in the movement. I mean, even as a little girl in second grade, refusing to say the Pledge of Allegiance and getting sent to the to the principal's office, where the teachers refused to let this little brown Indian girl go bathroom at the school. These are the types of things that you're little and you're like, that's not fair. But as far as organizing goes, it really was the first Keystone One, if we're talking about pipelines and extractive industry. But even before that, I was involved with things like education, schools that were trying to cut hair, some of our boys' hair. And so it really started with the Keystone One pipeline. And I was not in South Dakota at the time. I was actually in Washington State. And we had heard about this Keystone One that was going to go through on the eastern side of South Dakota. And eventually that did go through. And then when we moved back to South Dakota, we moved back to my reservation in 2010 after I had a stroke. We heard that there was going to be another pipeline coming, and it was going to be the Keystone XL pipeline that was going to come. And we had just finished making a stand to protect our buffalo, our tribal buffalo. So we had already just come back from camping in winter in our cars. But we heard about this other pipeline. And originally TransCanada or TC Energy wanted to go straight through our reservation. They came through and they offered the tribe a bunch of money. They offered us Tempur-Pedic beds. They offered generators. They offered all kinds of crazy stuff. And of course we said no. And so that's kind of where it started. Fighting Keystone XL.
Got it. So can you explain for folks, especially folks who may be newer to understanding the concept of a pipeline and why there are folks who are opposing or like people who are trying to protect the land? Can you share a little bit more about what the impact might be and why you've been such a staunch advocate about trying to stop projects like these from moving forward?
We have to understand what pipelines move, right? So pipelines move oil, and there's several different kinds of oil. There's sweet crude Bakken oil. There's and then there's something called tar sand. And tar sand, you know that stuff, that black gooey gravelly stuff that they fill in with potholes? It's called bitumen. You guys might have seen that. That's tar sand. That's bitumen. So imagine that thick, gooey, viscous, horrible smelling stuff. They want to push through a pipeline. But what do you got to do that? You got to do all these additives. You got to add all these chemicals. You got to pollute water to push it through this. And with tar sands, you have to heat it up. And so one of the things that they wanted to do with Keystone XL is they wanted to add Bakken oil to it and then push it through to trying to make it more. But see, with tar sands, even when it's refined, it doesn't meet the Clean Air Act of the United States, even when it's refined. It is a third grade diesel, only refinable to a third grade diesel, and only can be shipped out overseas. So it's being shipped to China, right? So all their stuff about, oh, it's going to bring jobs, oh, it's going to do this, we're going to provide oil security, blah, blah, blah. That's a bunch of baloney. And pipelines do this, and oil companies want pipelines because it's a cheaper alternative to moving a mass amount of oil. We need to get away from our fossil fuel addiction.
Mm-hmm.
We must get away from our fossil fuel addiction. When you pull this stuff out of the earth, this is the lifeblood of Mother Earth. You know, we have to remember, we do not own Mother Earth. We are a part of this earth. And that shift of consciousness is what's starting to happen now. Just right there at the beginning. But we as Indigenous people have been saying this from the start, that we don't own the earth, we don't own the land, we don't own the water, we don't own the sky. We are part of it. Just think of our bodies. Everything that our bodies are made of, all the molecules and the carbons and the minerals and everything we need, the water, everything, is of the earth. So if we pollute the earth, we're polluting ourselves. The earth will survive. The sun will keep going, things will happen, but we sure as heck won't.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and what kind of planet is it going to be? So with that said, you know, these pipelines, they want to come in. The other thing about it is that they are corporations. They are not government entities. But what they do is they throw their money around, offer Tempur-Pedic beds, and they utilize the system to get what they want. And you see this very, very clear what's going on right now in Line 3 over in Minnesota, with the police going through a third-party clearinghouse with their receipts and saying, we need all of this money reimbursed for the activities we're doing because we're surveilling the protesters. And then Enbridge reimburses them. So they do things like this to get away with what they want to do. And we, as individual people, we have to push back. Now, all these regulations, FERC regulations, Army Corps of Engineers regulations, Department of Interior regulations, all these regulations are geared towards development.
Mm.
They're all geared towards development. They're all geared to giving corporations what they want. So we, the people, have to demand what we want, which is clean water, clean air, and the right to live, and the right to pursue happiness.
Absolutely, absolutely. Thank you for sharing that, Joy, because I remember, you know, I used to serve previously as the executive director of the Asian Pacific American Labor Alliance. And I remembered when the water protectors and the folks were really ramping up the actions against the pipelines. We are part of a coalition, the Labor Coalition for Community Action, which was a coalition of different labor organizations that represented people of color, women, and LGBTQ workers. And we took a strong stance against it. And I will tell you that there was lots of backlash. I won't say names of particular unions, but there was some backlash because, people were like, well, we're going to create new jobs. We're going to create union jobs when we're going to create union jobs when we move forward with these pipelines. And, our president at the time said, well, it's like you're saying like, okay, well, a union is going to take a tractor and run down your house. Does that make it, a union worker is going to take a tractor and run over your house? Does that make it okay? And I think it really forced a conversation within the labor movement around what does it mean to actually live our values in a way that, yes, demands labor jobs or union jobs, but also not at the expense of people and our land and our water. And even though we got a lot of backlash from it, it was one of my proudest moments being in that coalition, because we said, even if some of the unions may threaten to defund us or threaten to not support us anymore, that it was our duty and our responsibility to be in solidarity with folks who are on the front lines and with indigenous peoples and in protection of Mother Earth. And so I wanted to just share that, because you sharing kind of your work and how much of an inspiration it was for so many people, who maybe even people who haven't had a chance to meet you, or other folks who have been on the front line.
I am a huge union person, and people don't get that. I love unions. And I was a part of a union for several years, and I loved it. And the thing is about most people don't understand the history behind unions, and they don't understand that there really is, that was a justice fight. Mm-hmm. That's a justice fight. And I'm all for union jobs. I'm absolutely for union jobs. But again, not at the expense of what it takes for us to live and survive. And I believe that we can move towards a more just, renewable, equitable, regenerative economy built on our communities and what our communities need. And that means that we need to move towards more renewable resources. Everything that we need for the world and for us to survive is already here. The technology is already available.
Absolutely.
But we've been putting all our money into these false solutions and putting our money into our own destruction. The house is burning out all around us, and we're sitting here going, well, which door do we go out? Or the house is burning, but I'm going to pour more gas on it. That doesn't make any sense.
Not at all.
So we need to figure out, how do we move that money away from these multi-trillionaire, billionaire people that are hoarding it, that could never spend that amount of money ever, and put it into our communities and provide good paying jobs. I live on a reservation and in South Dakota, and a lot of people are like, oh yeah, those reservations in South Dakota, they're really poor. We are really poor economically, but man, we are rich socially. And you see that when people go, I'm going to go camp on the middle of winter, or I'm going to go to line 3, or I'm going to go to make this stand against this alcohol and drugs, or I'm going to go dog the meth dealer, whatever it is that they're going to do. And one of the things that happened with this COVID pandemic is, we were able to get money for the pandemic, right? Mm-hmm. And we put that, and we made jobs. And that was powerful. And now people have that under their belt. Sometimes they've never had a job before, and now they have it. So I am a huge union person, and our struggles do intersect.
Absolutely. Thank you for sharing that. And I think that part of our work and part of what I'm hoping more people will understand is that the more they understand our struggles are connected, the more they understand that our liberation and our freedom is connected, and that is why we need to build solidarity, and that we can't allow white supremacy. We can't allow capitalism. We can't allow corporate greed to divide, to sow division between our communities. And so that's one of the reasons why I'm so grateful that you are willing to kind of share space with me so that we can shed some light on the amazing work that you're doing, but also to bring more human faces and stories to more people so that they could find ways to be involved and be engaged and want to support. So I just wanted to name that. So another question that I had for you. So yesterday was Earth Day, and I'm one of the believers that we should be celebrating Earth Day every day. But I guess I think there's a special moment to celebrate on Earth Day, April 22nd. And so, one thing that we've been saying at Can't Stop Won't Stop Consulting is climate justice and environmental justice is also racial justice. And so, actually, one second, we actually will have an ASL interpreter join us. So can you just give me 1 second, Joy, to answer that so we can get them on? Okay. All right. Hello, Stephanie. Thank you so much for joining us. Okay. So I'll go ahead and just repeat the question. So what I would love for you to speak about, Joy, is can you tell us, how do you see the interconnectedness or the intersections of climate and environmental justice with racial and broader social justice?
Well, I can give you an example. One of the core Standing Rock, Dakota Access Pipeline. Dakota Access Pipeline originally wanted to go just north of Bismarck, North Dakota. And if you go north of Bismarck, North Dakota, there's actually refineries there. But the mayor of Bismarck had a meeting with the state and Energy Transfer Partners. And the mayor requested that they don't do that because the pipeline might leak and will threaten the water supply of Bismarck, North Dakota. So Energy Transfer Partners decided, well, we'll just move it a little south and go over because there's already a pipeline corridor there. And there's a pipeline corridor there. It was put in the very beginning of, it was like 82, 83. Really important to understand, though, that the fight in 82, 83, we had just won our right to practice our religion as Indigenous people in 1978. Even today, at some of the ceremonies that I go to, or the sun dances or other things that I may go to, we will be surveilled by airplanes and things. So they're still very scared of us. And so there were treaty people back in 1980 that said, don't put this pipeline route here by Standing Rock. But we didn't have the education or the organization ability at that time, because you're just coming out of not even being able to practice your own religion, right? Mm-hmm. So that's why that original pipeline corridor went through there. And of course, other pipelines and other extractive industries target BIPOC communities. Bahia Pipeline is going on, Mountain Valley Pipeline, you have the Formisa plant going on, plastics plant, huge problem, plastic plant. You have LNG projects that are going on, like over in Tacoma, over on the tidal flats, that are really the Puyallup tribal lands. So what they do is they target these communities because they think that we don't have the wherewithal to fight back. And most of the time we don't have the money. It's hard for us to get organized. It's hard for us to get the money to get lawyers. Mm-hmm. Fix this. Hold on, my daughter's messing with my phone here.
No worries.
She's like, things are beeping at me and it's driving her nuts. But they target indigenous, they target BIPOC communities. And they do that on purpose. And so as Because doing all kinds of stuff. So as it's important that we recognize that happens, and they have these corporations have another organization called the American Legislative Exchange Council.
Mm-hmm.
And they have representatives in every single state. And a state representative, all they got to do is pay $100 and they can be a part of ALEC. Well, but what ALEC does is they come up with legislation to push within the states, legislation and policy to push in the state so that they can get their projects to go through. And they absolutely target BIPOC communities or poorer communities. And you see that happening a lot, like in the Gulf Coast, entire towns, Louisiana and Alabama gone, right? In Cancer Alley. It's really scary.
Yeah.
Scary what these corporations can do. But we, the people, do have the power to fight back if we unite. And that's what they're terrified of, because we are uniting.
Absolutely.
We are recognizing the intersectionality between the different fights. We are recognizing, and it doesn't mean that things are going to be easy. It doesn't mean that we aren't going to have clashes. It doesn't mean that people's egos are going to be over here. My fight is more important, or people saying, well, Black people get murdered at a higher rate. Well, actually, Indigenous people get murdered at a higher rate among police, statistically. But there's just less of us. And but it doesn't mean that we're not both getting targeted and we're both getting harassed and we're both, every time I see a cop pull up behind me, I sit there going, okay, do I have what I need and do I remember what I have to say?
Right, right.
And then my husband is white passing, but he's Aleut, he's Aleut, he's Indigenous too, but he's white passing, so he doesn't have to face all the fears that I have to face.
Yeah.
So it can be interesting.
Yeah. Oh, I appreciate you bringing that up, because I think, so one thing that I've been thinking a lot about is just the violent history of the United States, right? And I actually always mention that, like, it's important for me to remind people, well, the quote unquote founders actually colonized land from Indigenous folks, tried to commit genocide, and then not only enslaved Indigenous folks that were stayed alive, but they stole actual folks from Africa to enslave Africans too. And so the same people that colonized, committed genocide, and enslaved Black and Indigenous folks, and did it all in the name of dehumanizing people. And so that is the reason why it's important for us to build solidarity.
They did it in the name of greed. They did it in the name of capitalism. They did it in the name of what was in their own best self-interest.
Mm-hmm.
Because they wanted land and they wanted money and they wanted power over people. And the whole reason that they started bringing our Black relatives over from Africa was because they were enslaving Indigenous people, but we were dying. And so we didn't make good slaves. And so then they brought these, other people over. But even, and you look at the history of Black and Indigenous people, the Freeman towns, a lot of those Freeman towns were land that Indigenous people gave them,
mm-hmm.
And said, you can have this land. We recognize your struggle. And so then there were other tribes that said, well, we recognize that your struggle, but we'll bring you into our tribe. So there's Freeman. And so there has always been a connection with our Black brothers and sisters.
Absolutely.
And that doesn't mean that as of today, however, that there isn't prejudice between Indigenous people and Black people. Now, I will name that because there is. And there are people within our own tribes who don't like people that are mixed with Black people. But then that's the colonizer. That's that same thing where people in Korea or Japan or India try to put stuff to make their face lighter.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that's that colonizer.
Yeah.
And we have to, you know, there is healing that's starting to happen because now we're starting to say, hey, this prejudice exists. It's a forced prejudice upon us because it's not something that is Indigenous to be that way.
Right.
And anybody that acts that way around me is going to get, because I just don't put up with it.
No, I appreciate you naming that because I think that that's, you know, even as someone who organizes in the Filipino and broader Asian American community, there's definitely anti-Blackness, and we definitely work that needs to be done to decolonize our minds, and to and for me, that is why it's so important for us to do solidarity work and for us to for us to build genuine, vulnerable, open relationships with people. And as Antanya Lee says, to be in principled struggle with folks. Because I appreciate you said earlier, it's like, it doesn't mean it's going to be hard. It doesn't mean that there isn't going to be conflict, but conflict can be generative. Conflict, when you are able to communicate and you have these kinds of relationships, you could be able to work through and understand, okay, what are the differences? How do we work through this and do it together in a way that is collective and healing, to your point. So
we need to celebrate each other's differences.
You
know, we absolutely need to celebrate each other's differences and lift up each other's cultures and families and our interactions. And oh my God, I always tell, you know, if you look at a garden, yeah, it could all be planted in lavender or it could all be planted in white roses, but a garden is going to be so much more beautiful. You have peonies and tulips and daffodils and butterfly bushes and aloe vera and all kinds. It's going to be more beautiful, and that's humanity. It doesn't mean that each one of those plants doesn't have their own requirements for proper growth, sunlight, shade, whatever. But we are that humanity. And I'd much rather be in that garden than the other one. And so, you know, ye are the fruits of one tree and the leaves of one branch. You know, ye are the fruits of one tree and the leaves of one branch. So we I don't know, we got power. I just wish people understood that. We have so much power.
Yes, we have so much power. So another question for you, Joy. I know that you do a lot of traveling, or at least have done a lot of traveling to different places. Can you share with us, were there any memories or moments that stood out to you or that stuck out to you, and any particular lesson or thing that you think about every once in a while that someone maybe told you that still resonates with you?
Well, I was down in Houma territory, which is down in Louisiana, right? And we were out on the bayou, and I remember we were cruising along, and I saw this pipeline in the water, and I was like, "What's a pipeline doing in the water in the bayou?" And they told me 20 years ago that was all land, and that pipeline was underground. And so I was sitting there thinking and going, "But you guys had major hurricanes like Katrina and stuff." And they're like, "Yeah." I said, "Well, aren't these things going to break because of these hurricanes?" They go, "Yeah." And they do break. And And I was down there in Huma territory. Amazing people. Oh my God. They know how to throw a party. Fun. And but down there, they're losing a football field of land a day. Down there losing. And we were down on the bayou, and there's these little spots of land, and I saw wild horses. And they told me there used to be wild horses all over down there, but now it's all water. So I think about that. And the Huma were the first ones here in so-called United States that became climate refugees. People don't understand that. We have climate refugees here in so-called United States. And then, of course, you have our relatives up in Alaska along the coast that are becoming climate refugees now. And, like I said, my husband's a Aleut. And so we were always thinking about our relatives up there, what's going to happen with the fishing. Because even now, with like the fishing up there is really changed because the temperature of the water has changed.
Right.
And so that hugely affects. When the water along the oceans changes, it affects the air patterns in the atmosphere. And so that is what's causing these huge level 5 hurricanes and even level 5 tornadoes here in the Midwest. I mean, it used to be level 3 was horrible, and then level 4, and now last year there was a level 5. That's like 5 miles long, a tornado. And it's, it's like, whoa.
Right. So Joy, can you, you mentioned now a couple of times the term climate refugee. For those of who are maybe newer to that term, can you just share a little bit more about what you mean by that?
So as the climate changes, and it is changing very rapidly, a lot faster than even scientists are starting to grasp hold of right now. People who live along environmental areas that are sensitive to those climate changes will be forced to move. And of course, if you're losing your land base because the water is rising, then you're being forced to move. You become a climate refugee because that's the climate caused you to move. You see it with the fires in California. They are climate refugees. I mean.
No, I thank you for explaining that. I remember hearing it. I had the honor of participating in a climate delegation to Guam, and one of the nonprofits that we worked with there, Pazuta, which was a coalition of different nonprofits in the Pacific Islands. And it was there where people were saying, like, we really need to address the fact that some islands are literally going to be underwater in the next couple of years, right? And so that means literally not only islands that also have communities and families and peoples who are on there. And so how are we addressing that, and and what's going to happen with those folks, And so it was in that I first heard.
In places like Guam are really interesting because the largest polluter in the entire world is the U.S. military, right? And they're the largest user of fossil fuels. And so you have places like Guam that have large militarized presence. And most Americans don't realize it, right? They don't realize that the United States has these huge military bases in places like Guam and whatnot. And so we really do need to look at how do we defund that and change the energy consumption within the United States military. One, we don't need a military as big as it is, obviously, but we need to look at what we actually need to use. And Guam was interesting.
Yes, no, and part of why I was interested in going was, to your point, I was actually born on a Navy base in Guam.
Oh,
Yeah, for me, it was somewhat of a, like, when I went on the delegation, it was the first time that I've been back to Guam since being born there. So I didn't really remember what it was like. But when I went there, I was like, wow. So it's literally like, here is the Navy base, the bases. Here are some hotels. And then here are the Chamorro people and the other folks
mm,
who live there, who are like kind of being like, who are now forced into the military or into the service or tourism industry because of imperialism and because of
mm,
the role the military plays. And so it was just a very daunting moment for me, where I was like, wow, this is why it's important for me to uh, think think continue to think globally and make more connections to these fights around the role that imperialism has in the U.S.
yeah,
military in different parts of
and,
the world.
and most people don't understand that imperialism is very real in the here and now. They think imperialism, they think colonialization, they think, oh, that was 1800s, or whatever. No, it's very real and very now. And you can see that in a lot of areas here in the so-called United States that are very close to bases.
Absolutely.
Um, are so or near reservations. You see that imperialism. We went up against the United States military in Standing Rock. It's crazy. And now, of course, militarizing police and using police in that capacity. Um,
Right.
Scary.
Um, Joyce, I want to ask you a couple of other questions, if that's okay. So the next question I want to ask you is, I know I got connected to you through Jennifer at the Indigenous Environmental
Mm.
Network. Can you tell me about what's your experience been like with Indigenous Environmental Network, and how has it lifted up, work that you've been doing, or how have you connected with other folks in this line of work?
Well, Indigenous Environmental Network is a network of grassroots people that are around the entire world, right? Indigenous people are not just here in America. They're not just here in Canada. We have tribes in Mexico and tribes in Guatemala and tribes in Brazil and tribes in South in our global South. We have tribes in Thailand. You have tribes in Mongolia. You have tribes in India. You have tribes in all over the many, many, many varied places in Africa. The Sami people, right? Indigenous people are all over the world. So there's this network, right? And with Indigenous Environmental Network, I've been able to connect with people that and to get our story out with regards to Standing Rock, or with regards to Line 3, or with regards to Keystone XL, the uranium mining, the gold mining in the Black Hills, which is the whole reason they decided to come into South Dakota and blatantly disregard our treaties. Uh, it's been challenging, and it's been fun, and that's the type of work that you want to do. You want to find something that challenges you and that's fun to do, and that you're relatively good at. So that's what I am. I I started out just like everybody else, right? I didn't have no money. My husband and I used to get up at 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning and make cinnamon rolls and banana bread and popcorn balls, and we would go and sell them in the morning so we could have gas money to get to the front line. And the whole time that I was camping at Standing Rock, my husband had to work during the week, and then he would come up on the weekend, because otherwise we couldn't afford anything, right? Especially when cars start breaking down. So, uh, and then Ian asked me if I wanted to come on as a consultant, work with them. I was like, yeah, sure, that's cool. So that's kind of how that started.
Got it. So I'm meeting a lot of new and young activists and organizers, Joy, that are being politicized because of the pandemic, being politicized because of the movements in defense of Black life, and last summer, who are being politicized because some of the recent acts of violence against the Asian community and the
Mhm.
community recently. And so, what is a belief, or what is something that you want to pass on to this new generation, this next generation of organizers and activists?
Don't let the old fogies tell you what to do. I'm serious. So I'll give you guys an example. The runs. So, some of you may have heard about the youth that you ran to Washington, D.C., right? Well, originally, the first one was from Wachpala to Mobridge, South Dakota. The second one was from Standing Rock, Cannonball to Omaha, Nebraska. And people were like, you're going to run 700 and 800 miles? And we're like, all right, cool. What do you guys need? And then they came back a week after that one was done and like, we want to run to Washington, D.C. And I'm like, okay. And there were other people who were like, oh my God, you can't do that. It's going to cost money and blah, blah. And I'm just sitting here like, we want to do it, so let's do it. Let's find a way to do it. If you can dream it, it can happen.
Mm. Mm.
Now, see, I'm disabled. I've got all kinds of things wrong with me, and I go to all kinds of ologists and everything. But if I listened to what everybody told me to do, I would never have camped that first night at Standing Rock. I would never have been down at Frontline Camp for Keystone XL. But if you can dream it, you can make it happen, and don't let the old fogies tell you what to do.
Mm. Ooh, I appreciate that so much. One thing at the firm that we say that we like to do is help people live in radical joy and to unlock their most radical imagination.
Mm-hmm.
What's a way that you think that will help people be able to unlock that? How can we dream more? How can we vision more?
How can you dream and how can you vision more? What brings you joy?
Mm.
Because you're not going to move and you're not going to invest your time and energy into something unless you're doing something that brings you joy. That doesn't mean self-centering this movement, because one of the things, the justice movement, whether it's environmental justice, racial justice, economic justice, social justice, women's rights, LGBTQ2S rights, whatever it is, it's justice, right? This justice fight isn't about us.
Mm.
It's never about us. If you are putting yourself centered first, you need to step the hell back.
Mm.
Because somebody will put you back. Somebody will put you in place. But if it brings you joy and you're able to share that joy, because joy replicates joy.
Mm.
If you're able to do that, you bring love, and love is transformative.
Mm.
And it's not a hippy dippy kind of love. Yeah, it can be hippy dippy kind of love, but it's very real. Love is very real. Love is very raw. Love is very tangible. So find your joy.
Mm. Yes, dancing brings me joy. So lately I've been trying to get my move on, even start my different meetings with music so that it brings people a different vibe and energy. And so that's definitely something. All right, so a couple more questions as we are getting ready to close out. So one question is, what's a call to action? There's people who are watching now, people who are going to probably watch the recording later. What's the call to action that you have for folks in this moment?
So you can go to a website called buildbackfossilfree.org, buildbackfossilfree.org. And on there you can sign a petition demanding President Biden stop all these oil infrastructures, the fracking, oil, the pipelines, whatever. Definitely go sign that petition. If you are part of an organization and your organization would like to join the Build Back Fossil Free movement, come and join us with that. That would be powerful and amazing. Right now, I think we're like at 230 some organizations. So that's amazing. I mean, this is a huge coalition of people telling Biden, stop the madness, demand the climate emergency, all this stuff. So that's something tangible you can do. You can go to IENEARTH, There you will find a multitude of information. I'm really encouraging people right now to learn about the false solutions of carbon markets and carbon offsets. These are designed in a way for corporations to continue to pollute and target BIPOC communities and threaten tribal sovereignty and our sovereign rights, and to ease their own consciousness while they continue to pollute and threaten and harm the environment. So there's some new animation on there, new video on there. Go learn, it's amazing. So that's something that I'm encouraging people to do. If you want to actually get out on the line, if you are ready to make that step, then line 3 is the place that you want to go. Remember to be self-sufficient. This is not a place to go and ask for people to provide you with food and clothing and blah, blah, blah. You need to be self-sufficient. You need to be willing to know your rights, and you need to follow matriarchal decision making, because the Anishinaabe are very much a matriarchal society. You need to follow Indigenous leadership if you're going to go to line 3, and respect the various camps. There's 5 camps. They all have their own requirements, but definitely learn more about line 3. There's things that are going on in the Gulf Coast. I tell people, everywhere you go here in so-called United States, so-called America, within 200 miles of where you live, you're going to find a water fight. You're going to find an air fight. You're going to find a land fight. Learn whose land you're on. This is and know whose land you are actually occupy, and find out if those communities need your help. It can be as simple as helping out at a community garden. And go help your wounded veterans. There's so many ways of getting involved, and I just really encourage people. But seriously, we can all do our individual things. I have my the straws, and I do all that sort of stuff. Those are individual, but those are just piddle things. But the bigger things are learning about the like carbon credits and carbon offsets. How those are false solutions, targeting corporations, and changing the laws so that they don't favor corporations. So if that's something you're into doing, go for it. We need more people.
Awesome. As a true organizer, we appreciate all the calls to action. There's definitely many ways. We've dropped some of them in the chat. We encourage folks to continue. Go ahead and follow Joy now as well. Follow Indigenous and Environmental Network so you could stay up to date on all the campaigns and organizing they are up to. Joy, thank you so much. In Tagalog, my language in the Philippines, salamat for spending part of your Friday with me. I'm looking forward to learning more, building more, and hope that you and your family continue to be safe and healthy and get all the care and community you need.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And everybody take care. Doksha. Okay, we don't say goodbye. In Lakota, we don't say goodbye. We just say till next time, Doksha.
Well, until next time, Joy.
Okay, so I turn it on.